Welcome to Conversations over Cappuccino. This is I have the great privilege to talk to Doug Shear today, who's an artist in his own right and also chairman and now chairman emeritus of a wonderful organization, remarkable organization called Artists Talk on Art. Although that will not be the main focus of our talk today, because we'll be focusing on Doug's journey through art and his life and how he evolved in all his creative expression. So thank you, Doug, for coming. And
glad
today,
to be with you.
And we don't have cappuccino today for Conversations over Cappuccino. We have some seltzer water, which is have to do as a substitute.
Right.
But anyway, Doug, tell us about how. Well, tell us about tell us about Artists Talk on Art. Let's start with that.
Well, the capsule of Artists Talk on Art is, it was founded in 1974 in a period where there was a lot of upheaval in the art world, a lot of political unrest, in part because of the Vietnam War, in part because of the rise or expansion of feminism, and also the beginnings of really being, the art world being much more inclusive, racially, ethnically, and even aesthetically inclusive. And we were influenced by, I should say...
Well, what is, if you can just give an overview.
So Artists Talk on Art is a panel series, it's a forum in the art world that at this stage now, 51 years later,
51 years. That's
right,
a long time.
Is the longest running and most prolific of the forums in the art world, which has inspired in turn many other series that now exist. The capsule of it is that over all of this time, over 1,200 recordings have been made from events, both panels and dialogues and presentations.
Since 1974.
Since 74, starting in January of 75. And over 9,000 individual artists, critics, curators, historians, lawyers, gallerists, etc. have appeared. Andy Warhol has a phrase that he said, someday everyone will have their 15 minutes of fame. So we like to say that ATOA, or Artists Talk on Art, provided many people with their 15 minutes of fame, including many members of the Warhol circle. But since we're not talking about this in any too great a detail, I'll just say that I met my co-founders at a video facility that I was running in Tribeca,
right, which
we'll talk about. We will talk about that today. But we'll talk about how that developed into ATOA in some subsequent...
hopefully
event.
in a subsequent
Right.
video. So tell us about... Let's start at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Because you come from an intensely artistic family.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really
right.
immersed in art from the very beginning. Tell us about that.
So I like to say I'm from the Southwest. Southwestern Manhattan. Okay. Which means Greenwich Village. So I first lived in an apartment that was on 16th Street, which is sort of on the cusp or edge of the village, and then we moved into the village when I was about 2.5 to Hudson Street and Horatio, or between Gansevoort and Horatio Streets, in a building that's still there, and we were on the tallest building on that block. We were on the 6th floor. The entire building was Irish longshoremen families, because that was the nature of the West Village at that time.
Right.
There were still working
Mm-hmm.
docks.
Right.
And Hudson Street itself was quite a street. It had saloons. It had, in fact, when you looked we had 2 apartments, and I'll explain that in a moment. One was a living apartment, which looked east on Hudson, looked eastbound on Hudson. You could sort of see down Horatio Street. And the other apartment was the studio apartment, which was diagonally, there were 4 on the floor, was diagonally looking west and north. So you could see the High Line Railroad, sometimes with steam locomotives, and the meatpacking district was really right there on Gansevoort,
Mm-hmm.
just around the corner. People would swim off the docks. You had, young kids would dive into the water.
Really?
One of my favorite
When they
little
could.
touches of that is they would take metal clothes hangers and they would push one end into the wood of the dock, and it would curl over the edge, and the line would drop down. They'd be fishing, and it would have a little cat's bell, a little tiny cat's bell. So if there was a strike, the bell would ring. So that was quite colorful as something. What I was going to say, though, is the houses, the little buildings that were across the street, across Hudson, looked really like the Edward Hopper painting called Early Sunday Morning.
Mm.
I didn't learn until many, many years later that it wasn't from there. That scene was actually on 16th or 17th Street and 7th Avenue. But that block across on Hudson looked just like it.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, your family, your families were both intensely artistic.
Mm-hmm.
On
Well,
both sides.
both my parents were, let's start with just my parents, Benjamin Shear and Marcia C. Shear. C stood for Coleman. Were both artists. They were both in the Artists Union, which preceded the WPA projects. Then they were each in the WA projects. My father,
WPA is the
Works Project Administration.
Mm-hmm.
The Federal Arts Project,
Right.
was another name.
Which supported artists through
Right.
through the Depression.
Yeah, about 5,000 of them, I believe, altogether.
Really, that's.
And so, but the Artists Union predated that, and it's incredible how incestuous all of this was in Lower Manhattan. That the Artists Union was located on 15th and 5th Avenue, roughly right there, my parents met each other at a loft that my mother and her sister had on 17th and Broadway, all very close together, right? And the center of political activity was Union Square in those days. So it was all very much very intense of a environment aesthetically and politically. And then, then they moved to Hudson Street, and when they were on Hudson Street, they were both students of Hans Hofmann.
Right, who was one of
he was considered to be the most important teacher
of art
in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Competition included Joseph Albers and Amadei Ozenfant. These are other important teachers. But from my perspective, at least, and my parents, it was Hofmann.
And so they were students of his over a fairly long period of time.
Oh, they were students of his over 6 or 7 years,
Mm-hmm.
and they would have overlapped. I went to PS 41, which was the Greenwich Village Elementary School,
Yes.
and several of my friends in my same homeroom every year, same class, were Robert De Niro Sr.'s son,
This is
the actor.
I told Doug to have lots of stories because he's encyclopedic in his knowledge.
Right.
But I love the stories. So tell us about the. De
Well,
Niro
I mean,
connection.
aside from the fact that we hung out together and we were friends and we had friends in mutual, friends in common.
This is the actor Robert.
Right,
De Niro.
Robert, the actor. His parents were both Hans Hofmann students, and they were both in the WPA, and they were both in the Artists Union. So our family and his family had a lot in common with each other, and we saw a lot of each other. And I've stayed somewhat in touch with him. The last contact was a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and he lives, in fact, in the Hudson Valley, at least part time. What else I would say is, in terms of the Hofmann influence, Hans Hofmann was, no question, the leading teacher of the abstract expressionists. So that's a connection that, although Robert De Niro Sr., although you could call him a New York school painter, was not really an abstract expressionist, so he's sometimes called that.
And this is going to be important because you consider yourself, at least right now, an abstract expressionist.
Well, yes, I'm definitely an abstract expressionist. And another correspondence with De Niro is that for years I thought I was the only child that ever had the experience of being in the Hoffman class. But I subsequently saw a documentary on Robert De Niro Sr. And discovered...
He brought his son?
Huh?
He brought his son.
No, well, he appeared in it, but what I'm saying is, in that documentary, it was revealed that Bobby De Niro, the actor, also had the same experience that I had. So he's the only other one
I see.
that had that experience. And as far as interaction with Hoffman, this was not only on 8th Street, where his New York school was, but also in Provincetown. So part of my story was that my parents and I went to Provincetown every summer for about 13 summers, where we interacted with many other abstract expressionists, or even just other kinds of painters.
Can you just define for our listeners, some of whom just may not be aware of this, what is abstract expressionism?
Well, one story I like about this is Will Barnett, who's a famous painter, lived to be almost 100. On one of his appearances at Artist Talk on Art, he described the difference between art prior to World War II and art after World War II very simply by saying, and I'm paraphrasing, before the war, everybody was outer directed. That is, artists were looking at the landscape, they were looking at the figure, etc. After the war, they became inner directed. So art became much more psychological, and art making became much more abstract, and in fact became almost entirely abstract, and that was the nature of the abstract expression.
And that was driven by a lot of forces, I believe, in terms of...
A reaction. It was a reaction to the war,
right?
To the horrors of the war. It was a reaction to the arrival in New York.
Both wars.
Of both wars, but particularly World War II. And the arrival of so many European artists, including people that had been part of the Bauhaus, who fled Europe, or at least fled Germany and then headed south and ultimately came to the United States. And you would see them on 8th Street in the Village. I mean, that was the center of the art world at that stage. It was... when Hitler took over... it's not so much when Hitler took over, but in 1933 specifically, the first thing the Nazis did was to close the Bauhaus.
The Bauhaus was...
So the Bauhaus was a school, but it really was also a kind of train of thought about graphic art and about abstraction and architecture and craft and so on. And so those artists in particular fled to the United States.
I see.
Yeah.
And then there was another...
And those were seeds, therefore, being planted for abstract expression.
And then in 1939, I think there was another exodus when the war started.
Well, there were many exoduses. I mean, the more intense things got. But a lot of the fleeing that was going on was from France and Spain and Portugal and Morocco. And so
they
forth.
settled, not exclusively, of course, but much of them settled in New York.
Yes.
And this gave the impetus for the so-called New York School, which is also equivalent to abstract expressionism, is that correct?
Well, abstract expressionism is the movement. New York School was a phrase that was given to it by several artists and several critics with the idea of trying to, like School of Paris, that was the idea. It was trying to be European in describing what abstract expressionism was. And it's useful to have the term New York School, because how do you describe Larry Rivers, who was of that period, but was really much more of a realist than, or a De Niro Sr. They're not really abstract expressionists, but they are New York School painters. Yeah.
So your parents did what did they do artistically?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So let's talk about the life before Hoffman.
There's too much to talk about.
Yeah, and then life after Hoffman. Yeah. So in the 1930s, let's say. So my father was significantly older than my mother. But so my father was born in 1905, my mother in 1916. And also my mother was interested in music. She graduated from Juilliard.
Studied piano.
In piano. And it wasn't until after that, in the Depression, that she, not her depression, but the Depression, that she decided that she would explore art and went to the Art Students League and did various things to study
Art
art.
Students League was again an epicenter of creative expression.
And a lot of Europeans landed there at that time as well. And I should mention too that the Black Mountain College, which was established in 1933.
An extraordinary university or college.
So that was it was no accident that was established in 1933 as well. And a lot of the expatriate European artists and writers and architects and so forth were there, including many that ended up in New York or came from New York to be part of the school, which lasted until 1957. But I'm digressing here a little bit to say, you were asking what kinds of artists were my parents. So both parents were representational artists, working from the figure, landscape, etc. My mother and father both did portraits. They did a wide variety of kinds of art. My father would be best described overall as an American impressionist, stylistically. My mother would have been more of a plein air landscape painter for the most part, but also did portraits and other things. She became totally out of the Hoffman experience. She became an abstract expressionist.
Oh, she did.
Expressionist. So she was a pioneering female abstract expressionist going back to the 40s. My father, though, never really gave up his sort of Europeanized American impressionism, except during the WPA. So in the WPA, he was in the poster project. My mother was in the easel project. Pollock was in the easel project, as an example. In the poster project, some of my father's buddies included Charles Sheeler, and in addition there was Ben Shawn. In any event, it's important to look at my father's social realist art, which he was doing during the years of the WPA.
Which there were two currents before the abstract expressionism. Social realism.
Well, there were many currents. So
social realism was one of them.
So social realism was one of them.
Regionalism.
Another one was surrealism.
Oh, surrealism at that time.
Yeah. So definitely, for example, Conrad Macchiarelli, who was a major abstract expressionist, before he was doing abstract expressionism, if you see his work from the 1930s, it was surrealism. It looked like De Chirico. So that's a little bit about what my parents were doing artistically.
And just one more thing, your mother eventually got into photographing.
So much later, my mother, in her 60s and 70s, later part of her life. Both my parents died at 72, so so for my mother, the last 11 years of her life, she switched from large-scale abstract paintings, some of which are in this studio we're sitting in.
I'd love to see them if we can.
Not today.
Not today.
Yeah.
Another day.
Another day. And she turned to alternative process photography. So she was using pinhole, which is lensless cameras, which she made herself, to capture images, to make negatives. Some negatives up to 20 by 24, which is a very large negative. And then she would print them. She would print them in 19th century methods of calotype and cyanotype, primarily. Cyanotype being a blue tone and calotypes of a beige tone, 19th century techniques. And recently we completed doing an archiving of her work, and separating everything out by genre, by subject matter, and found that there were over 1,500 hand printed, many of them one of a kind images that were done with the pinhole technique by her.
Wow.
in just that decade.
It's prolific.
Very prolific, yeah.
Now tell us about your evolution as an artist.
Right.
How do you
So
see that?
what I did, I have a few things here. This is a small painting that I did. I don't know. Can you get that on camera? Hopefully. This is a small painting that I did in 1965 that is sort of emblematic of what my style was like in the 60s.
I see.
This is after art school. And I went to Rodin School of Design.
Right.
And so I was starting to, even right from the beginning, I was getting sales of this type of work into some important collections. And I was showing not only in New York City, but I was showing in the Hamptons, Maine, on the Cape, quite a few
How would you
places.
characterize, what style of art would that be?
Well, that's a more geometric abstraction,
Okay.
or even though it's somewhat gestural, it's much less free form than what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my history of image making, I was doing that kind of work in the 60s until 1968 when I first discovered video. So I discovered video.
This is another
I discovered video equipment
1968.
because I had a young child at the time. I was married, and I needed to make money and I needed health insurance. Okay. So I answered an ad that turned out to be Smith Barney on Wall Street
Right.
for an audio-visual, I think is how they put it, audio-visual person.
Mm-hmm.
And I had, as experience in childhood, my parents had bought a reel-to-reel, an early reel-to-reel tape recorder,
Those were the good old days.
a Revere, something like that.
Mhm.
Okay. So I actually knew how to thread that, how to start it and
Right.
stop it, and there was no editing per se, but I knew how to operate it. So I got a job running a 2-camera black and white studio for Smith Barney, doing weekly interviews, sometimes bi-weekly, of CEOs of different companies, that
Oh,
kind of
really?
thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the business that was supporting that activity, technically and backing it up, was a place called CTL Electronics on Chamber Street and West Broadway, and they had this little place called the Egg Store, and that's how I got pulled into the Egg Store environment.
So you left Smith Barney and went to
So
the
after
next one.
several years at Smith Barney, I actually did a very brave thing, which is I threw caution to the winds, and I moved over to the Egg Store, first as basically a sort of assistant to the person that was actually running it.
Mhm.
I already was a client. I was already using some of the facility. And after about a year and a quarter, I was the one running the whole place. And the clients, just to mention a few names of clients, were Nam June Paik, who's a real pioneer, Yoko Ono,
They'll go on to that. Merce
Bill
Cunningham,
Merce Cunningham, Bill Viola,
really luminaries.
amazing people, and Twyla Tharp, the dancer. Merce Cunningham, of course, was a dancer. That was a very important step
Yeah, that was a
for me,
pivotal.
step, and it actually led to meeting Laurie Antonacci and Bob Wiegand, with whom I started Artist Talk on Art. Story that I'll save for some other time.
Right, which we'll hopefully do another time.
Right. But so certainly that answering that little two-line ad in the New York Times
Wow.
was a very important change in my
How
life.
fate just takes us places
Yeah,
that we never expect.
Right. And so what I was doing, it's interesting, my shtick, or whatever you want to call it in video art, was I did motion media, and I was showing at Anthology Film Archives, I was showing at what was then called the Mercer Art Center, which later became the Kitchen. It's also called the Mercer Kitchen, I guess, at some stage. became the Kitchen, which was a much more formal venue in Soho. And yeah, that went on for me for more than a dozen years. It went on
really?
for quite a while.
Time.
But my particular niche within video art was still images that were derived from motion video,
Right.
which I called painterly images squeezed from the tube, the cathode ray tube, right? And you'll see some of those. So that was what I was doing in video.
I see.
And then later on from that, I
Were you
returned
still
to painting.
You returned to painting after that.
Not very much, or if I was painting things that I would then, I was painting sketches, we'll call them, that I then was colorizing. Now colorizing,
which was
so colorizing was
the forefront of this.
being able to take a black and white image or an existing color image and assigning to each gray level of the which a colorizer would show you on screen.
Right.
You could assign a color value to a gray level in the image, and then you were creating the new color to that gray level.
Must have been so technical.
And so around 1973, this is about a year before ATOA was conceived. In '73, a client came into the egg store from representing a Hollywood production company that wanted to take a black and white motion picture. This had never been done.
Right.
A black and white motion picture. It happened to be an Our Gang comedy, if you remember these kids.
Yeah, sure.
And I took just, not even a minute's worth of this film, transferred it to black and white video, and then, it was in black and white, transferred the black and white film to black and white video, and then colorized it. So I am possibly, I can't say definitively, possibly the first person that ever successfully colorized a black and white movie.
That's amazing. So, but it was just.
And it took almost 50 years. It took almost 50 years later before Hollywood started to do it routinely.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, because these days they are doing it pretty frequently.
Yeah, but it was just a minute of a video. Was that?
Even less than a minute, because I was doing everything frame by frame. Actually, field by field.
How long did
there were
that
two
take
fields
you
in a frame.
How long did it take you to complete?
It was days.
Days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
Today AI does it in seconds.
Right, exactly.
So.
Yeah, but that was an important thing. And what else would I say? Just that it was amazing. It was fantastic to work with several hundred artists that passed through the egg store. Simply because no two of them was doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
some of it was conceptual art, some of
Right.
it was documentation, some of it was about colorization and effects. And this, by the way, is all in the analog era before the digital came along. Yeah, because that was like about a decade later.
Right.
Yeah.
So after the egg store, what's next?
Well, after the egg store, I had a parallel career in what I would call technology.
Yeah.
In a whole bunch of different, and I don't plan to get into that too much today.
No, I don't think so.
But I published magazines. I was at ad agencies. I was for quite a long time, over 50 years actually, part of the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. Ultimately, governor of the New York region. So I was on the board of governors. Did a lot of interesting things in that more commercial world.
Were you painting during that period?
And I was painting in that same period.
Painting.
And remember, I was running Artist Talking Art. Yeah, I was quite a busy person.
Which is you.
Yeah, and I was also writing I was writing on technology subjects for magazines all over the world. I was writing in 13 languages, or it was being printed in 13 languages. In almost every continent literally in every continent of the world.
Wow.
In that one, at the peak, about 81 or 82 countries, monthly. Yeah. So in some I was considered a contributing editor, in others I was a foreign correspondent, So I needed like a slouch hat and a trench coat.
Right.
And I did a lot of traveling.
How do you reconcile your intensely organizational side with
With
your
the creative
art,
side?
with the creative side? Which
Badly.
Was it
Yeah.
was it a tension you felt, or
No, not at all.
I see.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of people didn't know in the different worlds, didn't know about the other world. When I would tell some that I felt close with, that I would tell them, by the way, I'm, in addition to being here in, Tokyo or whatever what was going on, I also happen to run this thing in Soho in New York. Or when I say run, an important person in it, obviously.
In the ATOA.
It's important to say ATOA had many people
many
dedicated many
contributors.
hours and many days.
It's a massive project.
Yeah, and a lot of people are responsible for it. But it was something that was a constant in my life for, at this stage, 51 years. Yeah.
So let's switch now, if we could, to your art,
Yeah.
and because I really want to understand. Well, if you
Right.
could just take us through your art, and also if you could help us get into your psyche as you
Right.
paint and
Right.
what you're
So,
thinking of and what you're
The first
trying to
thing,
express.
the first thing I would say is that there are two major co-processing developments in abstract expressionism. One is color field painting, and so there are many different exponents of color field
which is
painting.
Hans
Mark
Hoffman.
Rothko is
Rothko.
probably the single best
Absolutely.
example.
Right.
But there are many. Morris Lewis, and there are many female artists also that were wonderful color field painters. And then there's gestural abstraction. So I identify more as a gestural abstractionist, and I'll show you some of this. It's behind us. But I'm also, I think it's pretty obvious, very much a colorist. So I'm coming to color through gesture. And there are many people that they come to gesture through color.
Okay.
So it's a different sensibility,
Right.
right? Both of those make up what we know today as abstract expressionism. Before I jump up to start showing paintings, let me just say that even though it's been around for over 80 years, I believe that abstract expressionism is still not only very vital, but it has more adherents than ever.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there are people joining the cause all the time. And, some of them are big names, some of them are not so big names, but it's a very popular movement in art, still to this day, showing no sign of disappearing.
Did you ever get into figurative and painting, or was it always
A tiny
the
bit,
geometric?
that's art school, some people are much more there. When I was at RISD, for example, it was very definitely already under the domination of abstract expressionism. Even though it had conceptual, there are other things going on. But very definitely, my foundations are in abstract expressionism. And I was painting abstractly, or even abexly, as far back as my teen years.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So let me
let's
show you, I
take
guess,
us
a few
around.
things. So this painting is, I think, a pretty good way of seeing. You notice that I'm laying on the paint primarily with palette knives, some large ones, some small ones. I'm also scratching. I'm trying to drag the new color that I'm laying down over one that's already down on the canvas, usually while they're still wet, so that I'm actually altering the older color with the newer color that I'm
How
applying
did you make these lines that are?
with the edge of the palette knife.
I see.
Yeah. In fact, let me just get.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so part of what I can show you, this is again a somewhat similar kind of approach. You'll notice that there are some scratches on the surface of the canvas. So many painters generally, and certainly abstract expressionists as well, since they're painters, are mixing color on a palette, or they're mixing color in jars or cans, depending on what quantity, and they're then applying that to the canvas, either with palette knives or most often with brushes, sponges, etc. I do a little bit of both. So I do apply paint that I've mixed in advance, but I also very definitely put paint right on the spackling knives, on the palette knives, and then effectively it's being mixed on the surface of the canvas.
Oh, I see.
And that's something I particularly like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see if I can show.
Stand up. Okay.
So there's another one behind you, kind of like in front of it at this point, but there's another one there.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting example as well. This is typical of works on paper that I do, and you can see that I'm dragging big swaths of color and scratching and doing things, and I'm doing so on paper. And although I work on many different kinds of paper, I'm absolutely crazy about working on what's called archival bond paper. So it's very thin. It's almost like onion skin. It's a very thin paper, but it allows me to get some very sensitive color feelings going on. And so I've done, I would say, in recent years, several thousand works on paper like this.
Really?
Yeah. I'll give you one other example.
Several thousand.
Yeah.
That's quite.
I'll give you another example that's in a monochrome painting.
Right, which is beautiful.
Just to illustrate that I do work in black and white. And again, you can see here, big swaths of in this case, there's white overlaying black. And I should say too, that in almost every painting that I'm doing, I'm using acrylic paint on paper or on canvas. I'm also using graphite in various forms, either graphite pencils or graphite sticks. Acrylic pens, so it's acrylic ink.
Wow.
And colored pencils, watercolor pencils, different kinds of things. And that's very typical of almost everything I do.
These uses of different mediums, different ways of expressing is kind of part and parcel of the experimental aspect of the abstract expressionist world, wouldn't you say?
Yes, except that what I would also, let me sit down again, I guess. That's true. But I think what happens is that over time, each artist finds their own style. There are some that seem to avoid that. I mean, Frank Stella is an example, who kept changing and changing from very, very tight geometric things to eventually very wild sort of abstract expressionist sculpture. So there are artists that are very changing in their nature. Picasso went through many different changes.
Many changes.
But more than that, Gerhard Richter is probably a good example of someone that had different styles early in his life, but is now considered an abstract expressionist exclusively, and has a certain kind of look that he's achieving through big, dragging big pieces of wood across squeegees across the canvas, and therefore mixing his colors. So he has a definite look. So I think that I have in my work a pretty consistent look by choice that I am experimenting. I experiment within that, but I'm experimenting really within that frame. Speaking of which, you notice that in many cases I've taped off the edges of the canvas.
Right,
and that's a device that I use not 100% of the time, but quite often.
You're respectful of the border.
Yeah, right.
Which many
It's a
were
border
not.
wall.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And Jackson Pollock was someone who is absolutely extraordinary with his use of different techniques and different,
Yeah, well, yeah, he went through changes,
Yeah.
certainly. Yeah.
yeah. But his use of different ways of applying the paint and
Mhm.
so anyway.
Right.
So can you tell us about this particular painting here?
Right. Yeah, so this, what's different about this painting is that it's a slightly different palette of color. So
Pastel.
it's more pastel-like. It also has quite a bit of mark making going on. Mark making is what you're seeing, the undermarks that you'll see coming through here
Right,
and there.
yeah, here.
Right. So what I do, and many artists also like this, is they will start with mark making on the canvas.
Applied
paper.
With what? Was that a...
Graphite, pencils,
Oh,
pens.
really? I see.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then they'll start laying color on. I do both though. I also make marks over the top of the paint. And examples of that, and here's a small example of that. That's an undermark, that's an undermark, but there are many, those are undermarks. And then I do the scratching, but I also am doing laying new marks on top.
Mm-hmm. I like it very much. I do like the color.
This is another painting. So this is another example. It's less pastel looking,
It is.
but you also see here both the undermarkings and the overmarkings.
Yeah, I can see that well.
Yeah.
But what does this...
What does it mean to me? Or?
Yeah, what does it mean to you? I mean, when people come, you know,
Yeah.
of course there's been this criticism of abstract art, and art critics have said this through the years. This is just, you know, a 5-year-old can paint this with,
Right.
you know, and whatever. What does it bring to you?
I think if a 5-year-old were painting this, I'd consider him to be neurotic. Okay. I think, first of all, I don't believe that it has to mean anything to me at all. Consciously. So one of the things that's been said about abstract expressionism is that it's delving into the unconscious. And so that, again, as I was referring to Will Barnett talking about, before the war everything was outer directed, after the war everything became inner directed, you get into a zone. As I'm painting, I get into a definite frame of mind, something's going on, which for me is often driven by the color. I will just start mixing color on either the canvas itself or paper, or on the various knives that I'm using, or sponges or brushes. And through that experience, I'm coming to some sort of harmonic moment, which gets me to a place where eventually I know that, okay, I'm done.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But that's a very psychic kind of thing, of knowing when it feels like it's done. It's a feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you're in the zone, what is that like?
It's very quiet. You know, it's very quiet. Now, I happen to like to have jazz or rock or various things,
Oh, really?
classical.
Oh.
I like to have music going on. But I also can just be painting with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No stimulus whatsoever, no obvious stimulus at all.
Mm-hmm.
Is fine with me.
Mm-hmm. Do you see musicality or other, you know, sensory experiences within your paintings when you're painting them?
Not particularly.
Not particularly.
Yeah, I mean, some people, there's a phrase for that called synesthesia. I think
Right,
it's called.
synesthesia, absolutely.
And we, of course, ATOA, we've done panels on everything. We had people from Juilliard on one occasion talking about synesthesia.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not me. You know, early on when I was a painter, I was absolutely enamored of bebop, you know, jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So Charlie Parker and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Dizzy Gillespie and so forth. But,
Because I can see a musicality to this.
yeah.
I mean, not that I could see how the different tones, the different variations or themes. Oh, that's a beautiful one. And very different in style.
Yeah, so that's why I'm pulling this out.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is different.
Very different in style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Again, taping off some areas and definitely under marks and some over marks. Like here's an over mark, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Scratching. There's certain things that I'm doing. This one's quite different. But
Oh,
just
wow.
see-
That's different.
I was trying to say which way is up here. I think that's right. I'm looking for the signature. There's always a signature somewhere.
Is it-
I'm lost. Okay, I think it's this way.
You know, it's an abstract expressionist if you don't know which way is up. Or which
Well,
way is down, which
usually
way
I
is
think.
down.
Whoops. Usually we would know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. So again, I love this one.
Beautiful.
So much of it is about color. And I should stand that off here a little bit. Oh yeah, it's signed here, so I am
Oh,
correct.
there you go. You're right.
Yeah. And lately, I've been abandoning the masking off the edge thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it was pretty typical of. And so this too, there's some overmarks, and undermarks, and scratchings, and mixing the color. You know, these are the typical things that are going on in my canvases. Mixing the colors on the surface during the painting.
I love the vibrancy in your paintings.
Mhm.
They're very alive.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to do a little bit of shtick here.
Oh, yes, please do.
You know, that we can go. It's going to feel out of sync, maybe, but okay.
That's okay.
Um,
Wherever it flows is
you know, we
the
were
way it
talking
flows.
about what was going on in my Woodstock period.
Oh, yes.
I mean, in the years of
We
Woodstock.
should talk about that a little bit.
So you know, I'm now in Woodstock for 15 years, currently, and very happy about that, and happy to be here, and like all the relationships with other artists, and yeah, that's great. But two things. So in the, I think it was about 68, 69, 70, I got involved with a project called Prajna. This is just a cover of a document. I did I was one of the authors, one of two authors of the marketing plan, or business plan.
That was in Woodstock?
This would have been in Shokan down the road.
Oh, I see.
And what's interesting about this project, it would have been, if it had succeeded, which it didn't, it would have been another Birdcliff sort of operation. Lots of houses and buildings and,
Wonderful.
you know,
Little
and,
Birdcliff
you know,
facilities.
studios and whatever.
Wonderful.
And this was with Alan Schoner, who was the curator of a very famous show at the Metropolitan Museum called Harlem on My Mind.
I remember that. Or
Yeah.
at least I know the phrase.
And the CPA for this was Ruben Gorowitz, who is a very famous CPA in the art world. Of course, they're both gone, but that was an interesting adventure for me in my 20s, you know, experience. And the other thing I was going to say, I'd be not telling the full story if I didn't say that my father was, in addition to being an artist, was an amateur scientist and an inventor. And this is an example. This photograph happens to be of my mother's family. This would be my grandfather and my great aunts, and I guess there's a great uncle also there. Oh, and great grandma. What's interesting about this, though, is this picture is not printed on the surface of this tile. It's a tile, but is penetrated into the surface of the tile by a method that was piezoelectric. You'll have to go look that up. But it anticipated facsimile technology.
Oh, really?
He was working on this in the 40s
Wow, isn't that
and the
amazing?
50s. This one did not get patented, but he did have a number of patents for graphic arts tools.
Really?
But watching him work on this over a period of time, going to England, he was working with a company there called Pilkington, which is a famous tile company in England. There's a famous Rolling Stones song about someone being up in the attic with, inventing sealing wax or something, some crazy thing. So my father was a bit of an eccentric in that sense, but the one tool that I remember he invented that was so fascinating was for silkscreen printing, where, for commercial purposes, where there would be lettering as part of it. He invented a what's called a film cutting knife. So it had two blades that would cut the film, and then you would peel off the film, and then the ink would pass through the
Wow.
opened areas. He designed and built and then helped to market one that would do the lettering in one pass instead of two passes. And the knives were capable of varying as you would go through a curve. They would automatically adjust themselves.
Wow.
And you could do even lettering that looked like it was done with a quill pen. So he was a very creative guy, not only as an artist but also as an inventor.
Yeah. So just as we're getting towards the end here, can you just tell us about your road to Woodstock? How you made transition here, and you had earlier ties with your family.
Well,
here, right?
I was first here in Woodstock in the 1940s. So I was born in '44. My parents were coming here. They were involved with the Art Students League summer school. My father had carpentry skills, so he was helping to build houses and renovate things. I don't know where they were living. I don't know the exact location. I'm sure it was just a rental, But I have that memory of coming up in the 40s, including that one of my childhood friends in the village, in Greenwich Village, was the daughter of Dave Lambert of Lambert, Hendricks and Ross, very famous jazz scat singers, bebop type, And they would come up to Woodstock, and I remember coming up to the Big Deep, and everybody took their clothes off.
Right.
That was Woodstock in the day.
That's a good reason to come back.
Yeah.
So pre-1960.
But then we went to Provincetown, because of Hoffman.
Yeah, Hans Hoffman.
But very fond memories, nice memories of Woodstock as a little child. And then I was back in the 60s and 70s on a very part-time basis. I had a business partner, Betty Ann Lopate, who was the sister of Philip and Leonard Lopate, the writers. And with her, and it wasn't a romantic thing, it was purely a business partnership. We had a booking agency that would book acts into the college circuit. And they were all kinds of musical acts. So it was everything from rock and roll to folk music.
Oh, wow.
Indian music. There was a sitarist. Everything really. Even the Fania All-Stars, which is in Latinx. We didn't get a lot of bookings for them, but it was people like Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, very famous, in Latinx. That went on for a couple of years. That was all. But we made trips to Nashville with a Greyhound bus, that was someone's rock bus.
Right.
In fact, it belonged to Pat Firpo, who was the Pablo light show at the Fillmore East. It was the house light show.
I've been there.
Yeah. And I went to his wedding, which was at Birdcliff, in the barn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And slept on the floor for a couple of nights.
Oh, did you?
Until everything wore off.
So you had all these ties
so I had that
connections.
And also I knew there was a guy here named Zubin. I never knew another name. It turned out it was Levine. But Zubin was under the influence of both Buddhism and Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
And these days, I think he's in the Far East somewhere, like Thailand or whatever. But for a long time, he was in Ojai, California,
Mm-hmm.
and before that, he was here, and he was the king of tie-dye.
Wow.
An amazing guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I even had him come to the egg store, and we did some experimental projects there.
Really?
And we also worked with a film and video maker who was an egg store client, who had in the East 40s near the UN a studio with an Oxbury animation stand that we used video with. That was very innovative at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It was otherwise 16 millimeter film. That was Francis Lee was his name. So
how did you make your final transition to here?
you mean most recently?
Yeah. Well, you said
I met my wife.
here.
Well, I met her online, which is how people meet people, or
Right.
met people at that point.
Right.
And we just had so many things in common.
And she was here.
Yeah, so my wife is Nora Licht,
Right.
that's her name.
Was an artist in her own right.
An artist in her own right, and has lived in Woodstock for 40 years this year.
Ah, so that
Okay.
was the draw, the final draw.
That was the draw.
see.
Although I can tell you one more story.
Sure.
Okay. So when we got married, and I got up to give the groom's speech, I related a story that at the time I had a little house right on the Delaware River, so about an hour from here in Sullivan County. And when we were first dating, I was driving over, and then I'd leave at 1 a.m. or something.
Right.
So one night, driving on 209, going back, to Sullivan, a deer jumped out in front of the car, and it got up and ran away, but it made horrendous damage to the grill of the car. So I called her the next day, and I said, "Look, we've been seeing each other quite a bit, but if this is going to keep going on, you're going to have to let me sleep on the floor. I'm going to have to stay over because I can't, risk this again."
Right.
So at the wedding, I said to the gathered people, the guests, I said, "That's how we went from dear to darling."
That's cute. That's adorable. That's adorable. Okay, so any other thoughts you'd like to share to conclude this episode?
Only that despite all I've done through Artist Talk on Art, of which I'm quite proud, my personal role.
It's an amazing story.
And everything that my colleagues did with me, that's a big story in my life. Half a century of anything is
It's a long time.
the definition of commitment. But at the most basic level, I have the way of relating this. So there's a well-known the late Peter Sheldall, who was the art critic of the New Yorker and also elsewhere, appeared with ATOA maybe 5 or 6 times. And he said a very charming thing in one of his last pieces of writing. He said, just to be in the art world, just to be an artist or a critic or anybody whose reality is the art world, is one of the most highly privileged things
It is very
you could want.
It is very privileged.
It's so unique, and it's so enriching.
Yeah.
To your life.
It's really putting yourself
Right.
into your work.
So despite all the things I've done in my life, and many different things, and principally Artist Talk on Art, I'm still proudest of simply calling myself an artist.
An artist.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah. I love being an artist.
Yeah. So that's a good way to conclude. Thank you very much for being on Conversations Artist Talk on Art, on Conversations over Cappuccino, and it's been a wonderful journey, Doug. And you've really, it's been very enlightening and fascinating to hear about your journey through art.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we'll have another episode on Artist Talk on Art, but we'll see if that.
I'll be
develops. There. You'll be there. You have to be there, as you're the founder, or one of the founders, and the chairman, etc. Mm-hmm. So thank you again for watching, and hope you enjoyed the show.
Mm-hmm.